right. Let's see how long I can go here without coughing. At any rate, I'm having trouble with the movie again, and I'll think of a new way of getting this done. Um, so, Eve, first of three books, it does end. We don't know where Aiden is. We don't know where the boyfriend is going. Um, it starts with Eve's mother's letter. And in the letter, I think we learn elsewhere that 98% of the people died, and Aiden tells that to Eve. But what we do learn from the mother is that the mother knows that she's going to die because everybody who took the inoculation, the vaccine, um, also dies. So it's not only a pandemic; it's it's a mess. And it's only happened not that many years ago, 12 or so. 5-year-olds end up going to the school, most of them 5 years old when everybody died, and they stay there for 12 years. So Eve is 17. Now, remember, uh, she's about 17, which means really excellent childbearing age, as she's going to come to find out. um, they go across the bridge, um, and they stay uh, t- basically tied to beds for the rest of their lives for as many years as they can bear children to repopulate uh, the Sand City. Now, while they're in school, they learn all kinds of things, and they get to choose what they want to, what their profession is going to be. For instance, uh, Eve wanted to become a muralist. I'm trying to remember the famed Frida, the famous Mexican muralist. She Eve thinks that she's going to. That's what's going to happen until Arden tells her differently. And unlike the others, Arden first tells Eve and the people that she pulls pranks on all the time that she's not an orphan really, and that her parents are alive in Sand City, which later on in the book you'll find was a complete lie because she was an orphan even before the plague hit. Um, I mean, what's interesting too is what they don't learn in the school. They learn that the king, for instance, is called the only man to be respected. Everybody else, men are horrible because they're training them so that they won't mind being nailed, if you will, to the beds for the rest of their lives. And they're not going to, obviously, no sex is involved in the impregnating of the girls. The book doesn't go into how that, well, maybe it does, but how that actually occurs. And so they're given all kinds of good medicine while they're in school, but they don't learn survival skills. They don't even learn how to swim. Apparently, Arden learned some things before uh, the book, before she became sent to the schools. Um, I know the way that they make girls fear men is pretty funny, except for the king of the city of sand, of course, in the New America. Um, one of the year-long courses that the girls take is actually called Dangers of Boys and Men, which is, and all the literature is, uh, as she will argue with later on, um, that that uh, you know all the interpretations of books, even to the Lighthouse, which I'm shocked that they even read that, is the husband's really selfish, and when in fact he really misses uh, the wife. So everything is interpreted to show that men screw everything up. Um, Now remember, Arden escapes from the school. One thing she does is Arden has hidden a uniform, and Eve sees her escape. And what she does is she gets in uh, the government vehicle and just drives out of the gate, um, where she will survive somehow. Catches rabbits from this thing, as when Eve escapes. Uh, and teacher Florence helps Eve escape. Eve goes and sees what goes on in the so-called graduation place with no windows in the back, so you can't see anything. And she looks into the window, peeks up, and finds she sees uh, I think it's Sophia uh, in the bed, who had been the valedictorian, if you will, three years previously, and she's ripe as a watermelon. Um, what happens is that Eve comes back and she's scratched and wet, and she kind of jumps her way across and gets thorns get her and everything. And teacher Florence, who knows the truth, she was 50 years old, I guess, when everything went wrong and with the plague, and is now knows the truth and knows that Eve has to leave, and so she's going to leave Pip and Ruth behind, for which she's going to feel very guilty. Yes, they do catch up with him in later books, but she tells Eve to travel along really 80 Highway 80 to the coast, and to look for a place called Califia, California. Califia, and that's San Francisco, where the book ends when they cross over the Golden Gate Bridge and see the land. She sees the lit lantern. If there's a lantern lit, there's room for you on the trail, as they call it, the underground railway that helps, among other things, orphans escape the clutches of the government. Um, Now, on the outside, they have names for all different kinds of things. Strays, though, are strays are the outsiders who Eve was taught live in the wild. And there are people out there, of course, and she will meet some, and some of them are wild. Um, by the way, again, when Eve escapes, she's probably 17 years old. I think I mentioned that, but I want to make sure I get that again. Um, they stay in the school for 12 years. She arrived when she was 5. Um, when she meets Caleb, um, who uh, basically rescues her, as you remember, from a bear protecting its cub. Caleb rides a horse, and on his shoulder, he has a tattoo. Um, and that tattoo is a circle with the New American crest inside. Uh, and this will become important when he and Eve are on their way to the trail and are stopped by soldiers. One of them rips at the shoulder and sees that he has this crest, which means that he is a runaway from the labor camp. As Caleb tells Eve, but she can't believe it until she knows it, that in fact, that some of the things that happen to the boys is worse than what happens to the girls. Let me see. And we don't find out until later on. Arden thinks that the king um, wants him to bear him a child or an heir. Um, as you find out soon enough, I don't think you find it out in our book. I'm sorry, I just read all 3 again. He wants her because he claims that he's her father, and there is intrigue that happens around there. But in fact, Arden is right in a way, that believes that the king is the only good man and that he would want her to bear an heir. Why else would he go to such extremes to find her? There's posters about her and things like that. So at any rate, Caleb takes Eve and the ailing Arden. Remember, she probably has a really bad bronchitis or something along those lines. And they go to Lake Tahoe, and that's where the boys live in the caves that they've made. They drilled to the side. If you look at a picture around Lake Tahoe, you'll see the rock and trees. Now, And there, at the camp where took Eve um, has something that a lot of them don't have. The ones in the wild, they have to learn to survive. They don't learn to read and write. Let's say, well, Eve wins over the youngest of boys by teaching to write their names and by reading to them, and that's and every day the boy would come and gather her leaves, and I misspelled it in the test. I have to go back. And he reads from The Giving Tree, which many of you probably have read. If you just Google the line, you'll come up with the name of the book. So The Giving Tree, remember that. Um, yes, I was telling you until the lighthouse, I couldn't remember the name of Mr. Ramsey. Um, and Caleb says, who happens to have read this book, don't ask me why, um, if you've ever read any of these books. I'm trying to remember her name right now. My head is so stuffed up from the allergies. Um, the To the Lighthouse, a Stream of Consciousness. But at school, Eve is taught that Mr. Ramsey is a selfish person who really didn't care about his wife. And Caleb tells her, no, 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 that the only exceptional man is the king, is what the girls learned. But he says, no, Mr. Ramsey mourns the death of his wife. And so the whole book is a process of Eve unlearning what she's been conditioned to believe uh, in, in the civilization, the world that what happens in the book is a dystopian novel like this one. You see that the world or civilization, if we want to call it, is a very, very a web, if you will, and at its core, fragile. Um, if all the electricity suddenly went out because of a electromagnetic pulse, there's books about this. Um, what would happen? You know, and you find that the web, of everything from medicine for diabetes, to refrigeration of anything, all things like that are very, very fragile. If one thing falls apart, the other things do as well. So the idea that civilization is just this incredibly strong, self-sufficient, and thing like that. This is what happens in our book to show how fragile it actually is, and where everybody turns into not really making things as much as living off of the tatters of the pieces of civilization that's left over. Um, and it also uh, it shows you that you need to know certain things. I like it. Arden is a mystery. Is a She's a really good picker of locks, as it turns out. Where she acquired the skill, we don't know, but she puts it to good use as part of her survival techniques. Um, Now, Caleb, Silas, and Leaf escaped from a labor camp where they were. Um, After they realized that the radio message that talked about Eloise included a code. And later on, after Eve escapes Fletcher with the help of Marjorie, she does something incredibly selfish. And part of what happens with love um, is she uses the code, and it turns out that everybody knows that one now. And they're in the 5 years since the underground Moss and company started working, they've changed the code 30 times. So um, when Eve does the code without asking, without anything, well, she brings about the death um, of people uh, from her selfishness, really. Without ignorance, too, I should say. Ignorance is a big thing. She has no idea, in many respects, what's going on. So that code becomes important. And by the way, it does over the 3 books. Um, yeah, and after Arden recovers from her illness, yeah, she does tell. she admits to Eve because she sees that Eve has in fact saved her life, and she'll return the favor before the end of the book. Um, she admits to Eve again that she was an orphan before the plague hit, and played it up to show that she was special because she was even more lonely than the others who at least had memories of parents. Um, and we learn that from Caleb that Leaf, or Life, who attempts to rape um, Eve, uh, is a much different person. But his brother Asher, um, maybe twin brother Asher, had a cold, and everybody's so afraid of the plague that they kick him out to die, basically, in the wild, um, uh, because they think that he's going to perhaps infect everybody else. Um, and after Leaf tries to rape Eve, Leaf betrays her to Fletcher, um, and who takes Eve and Arden away in a cage mounted on his truck, and in that cage is Lark. Um, but there is the thing, because Caleb has fled. Um, when he beats the hell out of Leaf, when he sees what's going on, the drunken Leaf. Uh, Leaf brags to Caleb that she wanted me. That instead of you. That's why do you think she was talking to me at the piano? And he says to Eve, "Is that true?" And there's one of those things of the question, right? Is it true? She has no idea because she has no interactions. Did she give messages to him that said, "I'm interested in having sex with you"? Um, and of course, there's all the feeling of betrayals and whatnot. Remember that Caleb; these are not fully formed adults yet. He will flee and eventually rescue Eve, um, who's after the authorities come and kill Otis and Marjorie and Lark, and he catches up to her because he's going on the same trail, looking for her, the trail that leads to San Francisco and other places along the way. There are different aspects here. It's like arteries going off in different directions. And Leaf betrays uh, her to Fletcher, who's promised medicine and whatnot, and then rips the boys off. Yeah, he's a good guy character, and he's not planning to take her and them to the city of sand, but to sell them probably as sex slaves. But his attempt is thwarted when by Lark, Eve, and Arden, they pretend that they have to go to the bathroom. I like it, and then they start running and go in different directions until Fletcher's ready to kill Eve or whatever he's ready to do. He's pretty angry, and Marjorie shoots him dead, so that they manage to escape the clutches of Fletcher. And we learn too that, as I told you, outside the schools, the people outside the schools who know the truth of what really goes on there for the young ladies, all the way into their adulthood. As outside of the schools, the people refer to the students as sows, little piggies with lots of female pigs, lots of children. Um, and I mean, that's they're commodities now. They commodify the adult life. Um, the oh yeah, Lark. Um, Lark doesn't believe about the schools, and she's in one of them, but she's still indoctrinated. She escaped because of violent treatment by one of the teachers, and she's captured by Fletcher, who's kind of a bounty hunter and also takes advantage of circumstances. The wild world is as when Caleb rescues Eve in his Volvo. She says, "Where did you get that?" And he had sold traded the horse, which is whom he loved, for the car, and he said that they're they're selfish, he says, but they're not, all that bad. These kids, these people he trades with, everybody's selfish, trying to look out for their own in this world turned very, very much, as Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote after the death of his friend, is that nature red in tooth and claw. It's just the survival of the fittest, if you will, and that doesn't mean the best people. Fletcher is a survivor because he's a nasty SOB. And if you're one of those people, you can get away with a lot more because any human kindness is taken advantage of. But then you have someone like Marjorie and Otis, who, in fact, are able, they have permission from the authorities to live out in the wild. Because one of the things is their advanced age. Of course, they've lost their children, and they're part of the Underground Railroad. You see Tubman and Martin Luther King quoted by them, and the idea that this is the new Underground Railroad to help everybody escape. Although I'm not, as far as racial diversity, I have to reread this more carefully to look into it. Who are the main characters? By the end, again, remember they trick Fletcher by not no getting out with the key of the cage. They said they have to go to the bathroom, which makes sense, obviously. And then he's again hoisted by his own petard. Lark, by the way, yes, Lark is captured by Fletcher because he leaves a jug of water by the side of the road. Remember, these kids, they don't learn to swim, they don't learn survival school and the skills in the schools. They're tricked, obviously, into staying and thinking they're special. Anyway, so Otis and Marjorie, of course, they will die, not because they kill Fletcher. I like it when Eve asks Marjorie if Fletcher's body is still outside. Marjorie tells her that their cats, Bill and Lisa, are taking care of him. Their cats are mountain lions, and yes, they'll dispose of most of the body. And Richards and Calverton are the two men who show up and kill. And they arrive to capture Eve, and they kill Marjorie, Otis, and poor Lark gets shot in the back of her neck when they're egressing from the tunnel, the escape path from the hidden room. Now Caleb will rescue Eve in that Volvo. I love it. And he didn't respond to her coded message because, in fact, he knew that everyone knew the code Eve had used. It's the wrong code, and they're able to track right away, as Marjorie says, they're on their way. You got to get moving, and in fact, they are. And so he was helpless, but he hoping beyond hope that she would escape. And of course, he went there and saw what had happened. But Eve and of course Caleb, but nothing's easy. They get stopped at a roadblock, and Eve shoots one of the soldiers in the side and then in the stomach. This will become, and they managed to escape because the younger of the young government people knows how to drive the Jeep, but also knows how to stitch up a wound. And Caleb was stabbed in the thigh, and he's losing blood. And so Eve makes a deal, you drive us, and I mean, excuse me, I'll let you go if you patch up Caleb, which he does, and then they are vegging. They go across the bridge to San Francisco, and the lantern's lit when they get to where they're going, and as Caleb knew would happen, they won't let Caleb. The women don't trust the men. Everything that goes around that comes around here in this strange society. He wanted to save her, and the best way is not to have her go with him because the government's looking for her, and it's easily betrayed and things along those lines. as you find out in the next books. As a matter of fact, they're trying to hunt down Caleb too, because if you kill a soldier, there's even if it's self-defense, they'll kill you. And so he's going to be hounded by the government people and Eve. Yeah, you can imagine what's going to happen with Arden, even Aiden. Why are they going to leave San Francisco? They're going to have to. And anyway, it goes on until the very end when all three of them are going to be reunited. Not happily ever. Well, it will be happy, but in this book, like so many of the more recent, especially since the Hunger Games, as I think I mentioned, in the earlier dystopian novels that have teenagers, I mean, it's young adults, so usually they're 17, 15, in those areas, there would be this logically constructed dystopian society. But people didn't think that, young people should have to suffer. Um, and that so there was this will to have a happy ending. Um, and then so the happy ending was illogical in contrast with the carefully plotted out dystopia. But with the newer ones, uh, people suffer, and I mean, and they don't do things just by themselves. They need armies and things along these lines. If you've read the Hunger Games and whatnot, you know at the end, the two are married, but it takes years before she'll have children, and they don't take part in the new government. They're not like the leaders of the world and things along those lines, as often happens in these young adult books. And Caleb suffers mightily, and so does Eve, and so does Aiden, and they're going to carry the wounds with them. That's one of the ideas here. But if you're going to make change, as I've argued in various places, then there's a price to be paid. Um, well, at any rate, I'm sure you'll do well on the quiz, and let me get this posted for you.